Hello, and thank you for tuning in to a melanated conversation. My name is Kelsey Lee, and tonight I will be joined by some of the best intellectual minds the Black Collective has to offer. Our objective this evening is to disseminate clear and concise information to progress our modern day revolution forward, while simultaneously articulating the very complex emotions that we are all experiencing during this time. Again, thank you for watching. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to a melanated conversation. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having us.
So we have Mr. Ben Jones, writer and producer. We have Miss Kayla Yates, healthcare professional. We have Mr. William Martin, CPA, and myself, Kelsey Lee, educational leader. So I want to start with a question that's going to kind of make you self-reflect a little bit. And I want to know, when did you discover that it was okay to be Black? And then when did you decide you were proud to be Black? Anyone can start.
I can start.
Okay.
So I would say my whole Blackness self-discovery journey has been very complicated. I think as a Black woman in America, number one, you have all of these beauty ideas that are not necessarily, they don't necessarily fit you. Especially as a young girl with thick hair and thick lips and, darker skin. It can be very complicated. So I think that it was mostly through education during my college career when I really started to learn all of the historical context in which we exist. That I really found confidence in who I really was, and I became very proud to be Black.
Yes.
When I speak about being Black, especially at work, right now I'm working in an environment where I am always the only Black nurse. So I'm very big on being unapologetically Black at work, because when you get to a certain level of success, unfortunately in America, a lot of times we are the only Black and brown faces that we see. So you have to walk around with that confidence.
Yes.
I am me. These are the expressions that I use. I might pop my lips a little bit.
Right.
She ain't popping her lips. But you really have to be comfortable in who you are. So I would say through education for me is where I really became grounded in who I am.
Wow.
I would say for me, I think you make a great point because I too am also usually the only Black and brown face wherever I go. But I grew up here in Memphis. I went to a majority Black high school, Central High School. I went to a historically Black college,
Go Warriors.
Morehouse College. With William.
Go Morehouse.
He's a lot older than I am. No, I'm kidding. Same fraternity too. My chapter brother. However, I mention that because I actually didn't give much thought to it because I grew up around Blackness and supported by so much Blackness that my Blackness was just affirmed really from since I was born because I grew up in a very Black environment, an environment that celebrated Blackness. However, when I left Atlanta and Morehouse, I went to Wall Street and I was immediately slapped in the face by my Blackness. And to be very honest, it really made me question, like you said, I'm like, can I use this language in on Wall Street? Can I? And you can relate to this. Can I use this language in corporate America? And also, I'm queer, and so like. Can I reveal my sexuality in these environments? And so I really struggled with that. And so when I left Wall Street and I decided that I wanted to become a screenwriter, I moved to LA, and so much of my journey in Los Angeles was being comfortable with my Blackness, being comfortable with my sexuality. Because one of the first things I heard when I got to Hollywood as a young Black writer was, don't write all Black stuff, because the world isn't all Black. And that messed with me for, I would say, 2 to 3 years in my career, because I was like, okay, let me prove to mainstream Hollywood that I know how to write on Will and Grace or Friends. And then it got to a point where I wasn't moving as fast in my career. I was like, wait a minute, I'm just going to be Black. I'm going to acknowledge and embrace everything I am. And so that's when actually my career took off, is when I started, and I've written on Insecure for 3 years. I've written on the TV show Underground. I co-created the TV series Boomerang, which are all Black shows. And I'm actually one of the Black writers in Hollywood that's kind of exclusively written on Black shows. And you know, you don't really give much thought to it until you're the only black person around, and it's a very tough thing to navigate.
For sure.
I'll say that it was very different for me. Growing up in Memphis, but in Carterville, and you're the only black child in the classroom. And it's different when you're young and you're in the 4th grade and you really don't understand who you are. No one looks like you, so you almost try to appeal to whiteness to fit in because you are the only one in the room. So I will say for me, when I got to college and I majored in English because I copied my brother, and I was exposed to all of these African American authors, and they were unapologetically black, and I just was so proud. And so now I'm in education, but when I was in the classroom as a teacher, and I taught at high need schools, high need schools where the children need a lot. It's a poverty community. They're all on free and reduced lunch, and they're angry. They just come in mad just because everything's just unfair. My main goal when teaching language arts was to ensure that I always put black text in front of them so that they could almost wake up to discover who they were, and it was beautiful to watch. Just 6th graders annotating text like college students. So for me, it definitely was being exposed to black authors. So I do that to children so they can be proud of their blackness earlier than I was.
Honestly, my story is similar to Ben's in that I grew up in black schools all my life. John P. Freeman, 1st through 8th grade, Central High School, 9th through 12.
We literally went through all the subjects.
And then Morehouse in college. And so I always felt like I grew up in like a nurturing environment. And I mean, to me, it was just like, it wasn't so much about being pro-black. It was just that I am black. Black is beautiful. And I'd say I always felt like I was no different than anybody else, and I can do anything that I want to do. So I always felt like I had that support too. I say the big thing is when I got to, like, similar to what you're saying, being like, graduated from Morehouse, got into like the real world, like corporate America, and that's when it was like, wow, like here's a wake-up call. It's like, okay, we might even have the same backgrounds, but like I'm just not perceived as being the same. Like I'm perceived differently. Things that I do are going to be criticized a little bit more. My slang, my vernacular. If I dress well, I dress nice, it's not viewed as like, oh, Will is very professional. Or maybe it's not viewed as like, I'm dressing very, very professional. Maybe it's just like, it has something to do with, appealing more so to the aesthetic than, the actual performance. So I don't know. All that to say, basically, like, coming up, really race and, like, color was never a thing to me. I loved it. When I got into the corporate America, it was like a wake-up call, like, wow, this isn't necessarily, like, loved and respected by everybody.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like I had, like, 22 years of background to look back on and say, like, look, I've had all this support. I know I'm great. Here's my track record. Here's my resume.
Yeah.
Let's play.
That's interesting. That was all very different answers.
I'll be born and raised
That's
here.
interesting. So Kayla, I want to actually start with you and talk about healthcare.
Okay.
And we know that there are numerous studies and data that show the health disparities against Black people.
Right.
I want to know, what are some ways that Black people can assert themselves when receiving care to get the proper care? We know that white doctors feel that we don't feel pain as much as white people, so they won't even prescribe pain medicine for the same injuries or health conditions.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that, and what do we do about that? What's the solution,
Right.
if there is one?
Oh, the solution is very complicated, but I think in even exploring the topic, to understand the historical context is key. You know, so even dating back to slavery, number one, the mistrust that Black people have with the healthcare system, deep rooted in racism and the dehumanization of the Black American from slavery. You know, all of the experiments that were performed on Black people. You know, the fact that the Foundation for Gynecology, the father of gynecology, I can't remember the doctor's name, basically obtained all of his data for current gynecology by experimenting surgeries and procedures on Black women without anesthesia. The medication, you know, to properly sedate you to be able to take the procedure. So many things like that, really deep-rooted issues kind of perpetuate the problems we see today. Also, the economic disparities that are rooted from where we come from as far as slavery. Money has a lot to do with it. Lifestyle has a lot to do with it. These poor neighborhoods. The fact that many Black health issues, chronic issues, such as hypertension, diabetes, asthma, all of these things are managed through the emergency room rather than regular health appointments. You know, so you have that. So there are just so many complicated things that go into why we are where we are in terms of healthcare.
Right. Do you feel that our answer is to only seek Black physicians?
I don't think that's the answer.
Why?
I don't, because I feel like let me say this. I really feel like management of chronic issues on a very basic level. For instance, taking your blood pressure medication, checking your blood pressure, taking medication for your diabetes, checking your blood sugar is huge. Just those little things, that little education that we don't get, those little chronic health conditions that we don't manage, that, you know, makes us more susceptible to being sick. You know, we're in the midst of a pandemic. All of those comorbidities compounded make us more susceptible to the virus, and we get more sick. So I really think on a really basic level, healthier eating. You know, I know it sounds ABC 1, 2, 3, but it's the God of the truth. Like, just better management of these everyday health conditions that, once again, are deep rooted. And, you know, they come from somewhere. We just didn't so happen to be more susceptible to hypertension and diabetes, you know? So all of those things that come with being Black, manage them better.
I have one quick question about that, though. As far as, like, making better health choices, do we need nutritionists for that? Or is it really just common sense?
I don't think it's common sense. I don't think, because it's not really spoke about a lot of times. A lot of people aren't educated about it. You know, and we're in the South. We're in the Stroke Belt, to be specific. Wow. So, you know, we like to eat what we like to eat, and we like to do what we like to do. But I really think that you don't necessarily need a nutritionist. You just need to make healthier, more intentional options. I feel like the Black experience, you know, whether we like it or not, has to be a more intentional experience than the white experience. You know,
I remember when I heard about food deserts. That really shocked me and threw me for a loop. Essentially, a lot of black and brown communities and urban communities, access to healthy and fresh fruits and vegetables is kind of low because there are a lot of communities that are in just food deserts. For example, if you don't have a car, if you don't make a living wage to have a car to drive 10 miles to Whole Foods, and the only place you can go to get your groceries, because you have to walk there, is the dollar store, that's how healthy your food is going to be, you know. And I do think there are policies to alleviate that, but I think the idea of food deserts, because those are where Black people live. I think we need to really start talking about that a lot. While there's all these Family Dollar stores, nothing against Family Dollar, but Family Dollar opens and Family Dollar has said, like, sometimes we are the only source of groceries for a lot of people who can't get to a Kroger or whatever, you know, especially now during the pandemic when the buses may not be running. And so, again, I think to your point, Black and brown people get hit the hardest I think there's a saying, you know, when white people get a cold, black people get the flu. And I think that's very true, because if there's something that's affecting society, people in underserved communities get hurt the most, you know.
Absolutely, and so many black people are so untrusting of healthcare that their white person has the call, they have access to go get just maintenance meds, or they go for a maintenance appointment. That black person waits and manages their healthcare issue in the emergency department. Is now in respiratory failure, now has to be intubated, now has to be sedated to be intubated, and then has to recover from all of those very invasive treatments. So, you know, it's the food desert, it's the healthcare deserts. You know, all of these things come into play when you talk about properly managing health.
What I'm hearing a lot is that in 2020, even though we understand all of these things that are unfair, there still has to be a sense of us taking our health by the reins.
Absolutely.
And responsibility for it. And I just think that self-care is something that really needs to be incorporated into our communities, our black communities, and just healing yourself with foods, like you said, healing yourself with meditation, healing your, you know, just looking at your health from a healing standpoint and seeking whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. So you made a post the other day. And you said you asked other black men how old were they when police first pulled a gun on them. And then you proceeded to explain the first time it happened to you. How did you even know to ask that question, and what responses were you getting?
Wow, that's a good point. I mean, the post you was referring to is that I posted the question, when was the first time the cops put a gun on you? And my first time was when I was filming my TV show that I co-created in Atlanta, Boomerang. And, you know, as you know, like sometimes you have to turn the camera around and get another shot. It takes about 45 minutes to like relight the scene, reset up the camera. And usually you're just sitting there. I would just go and take a walk, put my headphones on, and just kind of self-care, as you said. It's one of my forms of self-care. And when I was in Atlanta, cops just hopped the curb. 2 cops got out, guns to my face, and told me to get on the ground. And it was sort of just a case of mistaken identity. There was a shooting like a mile away, and they thought that I was the person. And what's so funny is that I was 35 when that happened, and the comments that came in, and people were like, "Wow, it only happened to you when you were 35. It happened to me when I was 16. It happened to me when I was 12. It happened to me when I was 14." And I think the through line here is the fact that most black men specifically have had the cops pull a gun to their face in this country. And I think that to me was my biggest takeaway from that post. I was like, I mean, I had like hundreds of comments and people sharing their stories. And I think to where I stand as a storyteller, as a writer, producer, to me, even hearing your stories about what you see on the front lines in healthcare, what the role of a storyteller, of a writer, what we can do is to share these stories, is to tell these stories. Because once we start having conversations about them, then people can actually start doing something about them, and people can also acknowledge that they're not the only ones going through this certain thing, you know. Absolutely. And I think, to me, my biggest opportunity during this pandemic and this revolution, as I like to call it, that we're going through, is just opening up people's mouths to start talking. Because I think, to me, that's what my role is, to broker conversations between individuals so we can just start talking about it. So the fact that I posted that and got all these people talking about it, about their experiences with the police, I mean, it's eye-opening. And I think the tradition in the black community is for us to be silent, is to be in pain and silence. And I think we have to, to your point, Kelsey, I think one thing that we have to do as far as our self-care is to start releasing this trauma and talking about it amongst ourselves. You know?
We almost take pride in
how much pain we can endure.
Carrying the trauma.
We're long-suffering people. And I think even the Bible talks about being being long suffering. I think that's one of the things that gives you your dependence and in your faith is that you suffer, but you know that your faith will bring you out of it. But that doesn't mean that we can't talk about it. And I love that you bring up self-care, because one great form of self-care is therapy, is talk therapy, is journaling. Yes. I encourage people to really do all of that stuff. I mean, I think once
Black people get therapy.
Yeah. I think once we start doing those things, I think just to even start talking about it will help us a lot.
And I also want to interject for a second. I also think that it's okay to not know what to say.
Yeah.
I feel like the experience is so complicated. Sometimes people don't even know what to say. They don't know where to start. They don't really know what they feel. A lot of times we feel like we have to have one emotion per situation.
Yeah.
And I'm very avid about therapy. I'm very avid about self-care. And what I discovered through therapy is it is okay for me in this moment to feel 60 different emotions about this one issue. They can all be conflicting, but that can be my truth, and I can really live in that and be confident in that. And I feel like the Black experience is so complicated in America that sometimes you don't really know how to feel, because you want to be a part of these white rooms, but you're Black and you're proud. You want to be able to speak like you're educated, but you want to use your vernacular. Right. So it is a very complex, conflicting experience.
Yeah. Mr. William.
Yes, ma'am.
So one can say that the Black community is facing more fights, if you will, than the white American or the average American. So we have a pandemic. We have this fight on racism. But then in our community, with the pandemic, everything closing, the unemployment rate skyrocketing with Black people, we are also in a fight against poverty and people just struggling financially. With your expertise and background, what are your thoughts on why our community has a hard time being financially stable, and what can we do to make sure, even during this time, that we remain financially stable if we are?
Yeah, it's funny. So we're talking about kind of like Ben, you're talking about like the health concerns around like Family Dollar. A lot of the issues that we face today as Black Americans is wholly driven by legislative policy, and that's legislative policy at the local level, city and county. That's the state level. That's the federal level. Even if you just Google redlining, redlining, which is illegal nowadays, but I mean there's still remnants of it, among other things like gerrymandering, are reasons why to a degree grocery stores wouldn't be some grocery stores wouldn't be in Black communities. It's the reason why you wouldn't have access to certain types of health care in Black communities. It's the reason why you couldn't have federally insured loans in Black communities. And if you think about it, I mean, if you think about what like a FHA loan is, or like a first-time home buyer loan, if it's supposed to be an investment into the community, but you can't even do it into the community that looks like you, then where are those funds going, right? And then if we think about like funding at the school level, how it works in elementary and middle school, and it's based on property taxes. Well, if you can't even buy new properties in the Black communities, then are we even where's the funding coming from? So to a large degree, it is systemic, and I think it's legislative. So just get out there and vote, right? As far as what we can do today to not harp on the past, I think in the Black community, it's like two key things we can just focus on. And I think we're getting better at it, but there's room for improvement. One, life insurance. I mean, literally, if your family's in debt, if your family's not in debt, I mean, to the extent that you lose your life, or like you're a business owner and you have a key man or like some sort of key personnel and they lose their life, overnight, like that's instant liquidity. That's leaving a legacy. And it's little things. And these are things that have been taken advantage of by people with skin tones that look opposite of us. We're different. And we've just kind of like left on the table. Another thing is like home ownership. And depending on where you live, Los Angeles is a very hairy place. New York, and there's a lot of Chicago, a lot of hairy places out here. But emphasis on home ownership versus renting. Why? Because you can get the equity. The market changes. You sell your house, you might have like you can easily have 5-6 figures of equity tied up, then you instantly get.
Yes, it's so interesting to hear you speak from a financial standpoint, but talking about real estate and like home ownership and things like that.
And it sounds so simplistic. I mean, not simplistic, but I mean, I think a lot of the. I don't want us to get bogged down with the barrage of messages during this time, but I think you just very clearly articulated two very small things that we can start focusing on. And I think it's just the information flow to Black people, which may be somewhat problematic to a certain extent.
There's a movie that I really want all of our viewers to watch if you have not watched it, and it's called The Banker. Have you all seen it? You seen it? You really need to watch it. And the only reason I watched it is because my husband was like, "You gotta watch this movie," and it goes into the redlining, but and this guy using real estate to to buy banks, and when he was acquiring the money to buy the banks, no one knew he was Black because he was using a white man to go in and do the deals.
And just to add one other thing, I think as Black folks, we're really good at playing games and learning games, like or anything athletic. We can look at a dance, analyze those dance moves, and learn that dance. We can watch a sport. We can look at the sport. We can assess it and learn how to play it. We need to take that same energy. We should keep doing that. And start and start applying that energy to like understanding like laws, because literally tax structuring is literally just the game of like playing around with the tax code, like seeing where can you straddle the line versus where do you need to be black and white. Where is it okay to be gray? Where is it okay to be black and white?
Yes,
absolutely.
And I wanted to you started touching on it about just our educational system and the issues that we're seeing just in the classroom. I have a charge to our teachers in Memphis. Despite the curriculum that you are having to use in Shelby County, please put those culturally responsive texts in front of your children. Make sure that they are able to understand themselves through articles, through stories, through poems, authors, Langston Hughes, County Cullen, that they're able to kind of dissect the minds of these authors to understand that these Black authors were talking to them. That is something that really made instruction rich in my classroom, and we didn't have any resources. Well, I don't need any resources. I just need the pencil and the text. That's all. We don't need anything else. And we mad because class over, because the discussion was so rich. The kids coming up with things, it reminds me of that story when you had the kids use one word, and they just coming up with things that I've been reading this poem since college. I didn't never come up with that. How did you know that? Their minds are pretty brilliant, but we don't really take the time to mold them.
In my opinion, I think education is the one thing that everyone can agree on is a huge disparity in this country. I don't think anyone's arguing the fact that underprivileged communities receive underprivileged and underserved education. And I think even when I look at, like the white women or the white people who are out in picket lines protesting right now, what I have seen signs that say, "I just didn't know." And I think James Baldwin has a great quote about like when you become enlightened, you start to question the system by which you were educated in. And our educational system hasn't been overhauled since I think the 30s or the 40s or something like that. Like even the hours of the school day reflect kids having to go home and go to work in the fields,
Yes, and I really agree with that because I'll just speak to an educational standpoint one more time. I'm currently in a course and it's called Leadership and Curriculum. And I'm learning everything about how a curriculum is written. And it's intentional that they are not really inclusive. It's intentional that black children don't see themselves in these curriculums, but they have to take tests and master these, standards to pass these tests with this curriculum that, I'm just gonna start acting up in class because I don't care about this. Yeah. This has nothing to do with me. I just can't. So it's just very interesting when you start looking at the history of, like you said, these systems, and but I still think you figure out a way to operate within it. And like you said, now we need to start recreating these things, rewriting these curriculum. Your curriculum writing team maybe needs to be all black.
Or the people who make the textbooks. Every institution needs to reflect the way the country looks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember learning about in Clark, Atlanta. I took a class. I think it was called like the modern period or something. But really, the instructor took the class and really just made it African American studies. And
y'all love a black college.
Because I took the class like as a place filler, like just to reach a certain amount of credits. Changed the game for me, shook me all the way up. And I was like 18, 19, but that's when I started to learn the importance of historical context. I'm not just about historical context, I'm just about context, period. Yes. Where I am just as a woman today and how I got here means everything to where I'm going. So I feel like, the state of Black America is the same thing. But anyway, so we took this class, and in the class, our instructor told us about the pedagogy of schools and how different schools are basically designed to operate in which the way they operate. For me, as a young black girl, I didn't have a negative experience in Memphis. I grew up in mostly black environments. I felt empowered. But there were just little things. Me and Kelsey talked about having a really sensitive spirit. You pick up on those little nuances and you don't know why you feel the way you feel. Right. And it's always empowering to me to realize we did not just end up here. Yeah. It's not by happenstance that our schools look like prisons. Yeah. That was by design.
My middle school had a fence around it.
Like, where are y'all going? and probably bars on the windows of a lot of these schools. And it's also not by happenstance that the rules are a lot more strict, and the children in poor areas are treated what people will argue like prisoners. And at these more elite schools and at these private schools, there's more freedom with the curriculum and like physically just walking around the school. You feel that and you just don't know why. So I just wanted to speak to that as far as education goes.
Yes. So right now we are seeing a lot of protests happening across the nation, but we have the pandemic going on as well. Do you feel, Kayla, that we have some mayors that are saying if you've been protesting, automatically consider yourself exposed to COVID-19? Do you agree with that? And how do you feel about trying to make sure that we are accumulating the justice that we seek, getting these officers charged and just shining a light on all of the injustices, but still taking care of our health in the midst?
Well, I am definitely for expressing your outrage, however it's true to your spirit. However, I do feel like if you have been protesting, it is unfortunately very likely that you have been exposed. I am working now in a COVID ICU. So I see the worst of the worst and the sickest of the sick as it comes to COVID-19, and it is still very rampant. The country is slowly but surely opening back up, but for sure I feel like It's still real. It's still real, y'all. It's still here. Definitely face covering, hand washing, um, just really once again healthcare. It gets very, very complicated. Like, I could blow y'all away with some of the ways we treat people, but on a very basic level, it's very ABC 1 2 3.
Yeah.
It's very much distance yourself. It's very much wash your hands. It's very much wear a mask. It's very much don't touch your eyes and your mouth while you're out. You know.
Yeah.
Life is simple, honestly. Like,
It's simply complicated.
Yeah.
It's really, because, as you know, and you are simply saying, hey, black teachers, put this black text in front of your kids to empower them.
Yes.
But you know.
Yeah. William, right now more than ever, black-owned businesses are nothing new. But right now, with our rage that we have, we are doing something very big but not realizing it, and that's redirecting the black dollar. I actually had a friend share a post with me about how other communities, the Jewish community and the Chinese community, they do not spend money outside of those community, like
30 days for Asian people.
wow. I mean, and it's like forbidden. Like, somebody in your community offers their service, and you're gonna go get it done there. And the post was, it was a girl getting married, and she was getting a florist, and she had a wedding planner, and the wedding planner, the girl getting married was black, and the wedding planner came to her and said, hey, I got you a list of black florists. And she said, oh, the florist doesn't have to be black. And the wedding planner said, oh, your family would let you spend that much money on a florist that isn't black? I'm Jewish. My family would never let me. And I just think back, like, I didn't have a black florist, but I could have. But first off, we got to unpack a lot of things here.
I'm not the financial expert, but I would like to unpack.
Okay, we got to unpack a lot of things, because now we're going into a psychology of why is white right.
And just to add to that, like, even as a community, like, people talk about the Jewish community, and like any immigrant community, most immigrant communities sort of have like some sort of shared nationality to some degree, except for like Jewish people. So like, they can come from all over. And you know, I'm not that versed in like different religions and things of that nature. But one nuance to like the black community in the United States is when we came over. First of all, we came over from Africa. Now, which is a continent, it's not a country, right?
Hello, let's start there.
Maybe we can drill down to like a smaller subset of countries, like in West Africa, right? But even then, like when we came over, there were people from Ghana, Nigeria, the Ivory Coast, all these different like countries, all these different tribes within these countries, different cultures within these tribes and
different
countries, different languages, and then they mixed us up.
Yeah.
Like slave owners or late slave holders, or like people who like the enslavers, literally mixed us up so that we couldn't communicate with each other.
Right.
And so when you talk about community, it's like the Jewish people went through the Holocaust, and I'm not trying to discount that experience
we're not discounting
at
the
all.
Holocaust at all.
But when it was over, it was like there were still people of the Jewish faith who can come back together. Yeah. For us, it's like, you know, slavery ends. Well, you know.
Now what?
We're so far removed. Yeah, it's like what community? Like,
absolutely.
I don't even think it was like a national thing. Then it was like a tribe, like it was tribal. So
and
it's
before we talk about
interjection,
and before we move on from context, I want to just talk about, when you talk about historical context, timelines. Because when you just look at a timeline, like honestly, we look at you know, when Martin Luther King, you know, was advocating for civil rights for Black Americans, and you just think that was so long ago. Yeah. That was down the street, around the corner. It wasn't that long ago. Yeah. It becomes a lot because she's like, but it's 2020. Why? That was down the street, and it's I mean, honestly, that was kind of my purpose for holding this conversation, because they did their due diligence. Right. So, what are we going to do, to contribute, to go further? They gave us the baton. So what conversations are we going to hold? What are we going to talk about? How are we going to disseminate information? And just, discuss feelings that are, need to be articulated. But that timelines just show it wasn't that long ago when we talk about context.
Throughout all of what's happening in the world right now, we kind of all have to acknowledge this is all of our problem. This is not just a Black America problem. Or, when we do talk about the challenges within the Black community, when you look at the historical context, slavery was fought. The Civil War helped end slavery because people in the North, Harriet Tubman and all, not to get too deep into the history of it, but they would basically go and do TED Talks. In the North, we wrote that episode of Underground where it's literally just Harriet Tubman speaking the entire episode, and she would go on a speaking tour to help people in the North understand, because they didn't travel down south to see the atrocity, the beatings, the pillaging, and all of that. They articulated. And then the Civil Rights Movement, when they put the cameras on the hoses, and people in the North saw that Black people being hosed, Emmett Till, and then even now when we have, again, social media has shown the police, and so I think what has to happen, and I do think we are having our civil rights moment now, because what's now happening is that everyone is now understanding this is all of our problem.
We weren't making this
So
up.
even with all, and I talked yesterday to Revolt TV about all Black Lives Matter, acknowledging the Black queer struggle, the Black trans struggle. Those are conversations that everyone needs to start having, and I think again I'm hopeful because now everyone is acknowledging, like, wait a minute, this is. And I cannot leave this panel without saying, when you watch the 9-minute video of George Floyd with that man on his neck, with his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes, it does something to you in a way that I think everything that's happening now is a perfect storm. But when I watch that, and you look at George Floyd's body, you see Emmett Till in his face. You see pretty much every Black person whose life has been taken away from them because because I think right around like 4 or 5 minutes, he started to look lifeless. Yeah. The way I looked at it.
Call for his mom.
Say it again.
And call for his mom.
Call for his mom. He was just starting. You can literally watch the video and watch the life drain out of his body. And I do think, George Floyd's, people question about how his life was lived, but George Floyd is a martyr because of how he died. And we're going to remember George Floyd's life because of how he died. And I do think that is now, there's no greater wake-up call than that, to let everybody know this is everybody's problem.
Yes. I just want to go back to strengthening the Black community, and I do feel that's going to be done financially. I do think there are a lot of people. I think part of it is financially. I think part of it is policy changes. But when we talk about redirecting the Black dollar, how powerful can that really make us?
It's very powerful. Even in civil rights. So I'm going to address that. But just the craziest thing, I've been mind blown recently from following Ben. Ben talks about James Baldwin all the time, right? But then even Muhammad Ali, all the different civil rights leaders. It's kind of crazy that a lot of the things that were recorded and written in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s are still relevant.
We could just
the
use them again. Use them again.
You can literally copy and paste and put your name on it and boom, that's a good speech, and it's relevant. That's crazy, right? Yeah. But then, so with that said, if you think back to those times, and you think back to civil rights, when I feel as a community we felt like we were making the most traction or gaining the most traction. A lot of the things that really kind of pushed change was when we would boycott
and not ride the bus. And they lost money. They lost so much money that they begged. They begged to let Black people sit wherever they want to sit because we're not making any money. They did.
Exactly.
And so, great segue into making sure that this movement is extended for it. I don't even know if we need to just take movement out of it, and we need to just say a way of life, because they did not get on the bus for almost
I think
a
it was
year.
over a month.
Over a month?
No, it was like 300 something days.
I thought it was a long time, to the point where the bus drivers were begging. They lost so much money that year.
You were talking about how, like, you saw that study where they talked about, like, in the Asian community, if somebody gets if an Asian person gets a $1 bill, that $1 bill will circulate in the Asian community for up to 30 days or 30 plus days. And I saw the same article, right? In the Jewish community, it's like around 20 days. I think in the white community, it's around 17 days. In the black community, it's not even days, it's like 6 hours. And so if you think about that in like today's time, like that's like, okay, on Friday I get paid Friday morning $1.
It goes right back.
It's not even Saturday morning and it's like out of the black
it's
community.
Right back out the black community.
So are we saying that that's our new boycott, is to not necessarily, it's to just patronize more of our own?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yes.
If 6 hours is the average time that is the average life cycle of $1 within the black community by a black person, just let's all just individually do our parts to like just increase that. And we don't even have to shoot for 30 days right now. Right? Like if it's 6 hours, like let's just try to keep it a day. Let's work on a day.
Keep the dollar in the budget.
And think about how much of an impact that would change.
Yes.
And I know there's reasons, right? Like, so growing up in a black community, in black schools, it was honestly to a degree a stereotype, right? Like sometimes people feel like black businesses don't give you the same level or degree of like customer service.
Yeah.
Right.
The complaints are there, right? But it's like, at the end of the day, like what's the ultimate goal?
Purpose.
What's the bigger picture? What's the bigger purpose?
Yeah, I agree for sure. Brother, question about Hollywood. Do you feel? I don't feel. I thank God for you and the stories that you and other black writers and producers have told, within the last 20 years and the TV shows. Do you feel now, once filming starts back, that there's going to be almost an intention to kind of ensure that black stories are told? Do you feel that do you feel that's gonna be ingenuine because now we want to tell black stories after the entire country is deciding that Black Lives Matter, and how do you think that you creators in the film and TV show world are going to go about starting to present those stories?
I am extremely encouraged. I'm extremely empowered because nothing's gonna be the same. I'm writing a movie now. I started writing a movie kind of when quarantine started, and then the revolution started to happen, and I redid the whole script because you can't, in good faith, tell that same story now that the world has changed. And I do think I'm definitely a person imbued with a sense of responsibility for the stories that I tell, but I also think that everyone's kind of clear now that if there's a cop in a show, that's a different kind of show now. Like if there's a white cop present in a series, I don't care if it's Rookie Blue on Fox or whatever show it is, everyone's clear now that that's a different kind of story.
The energy is different.
And so I a shameless plug, not even a shameless plug. I'm really proud that I just recently launched a program called Bend the Writers Room, which is a virtual TV writing pilot program for screenwriters of color. And the great thing about it is that it's virtual, so that I can train writers from all across the country. Because I'm telling you now, Hollywood, I don't care if it's genuine or disingenuous. Just give us the money to tell our story.
Right.
I don't care if you really believe in the cause. But I wanted to start this program, and I'm really glad that God gave me this push to do it. I want to do it now because Hollywood is going to be ready. The world is ready. Yes. The world is ready. To your point, they're ready to hear stories about the historical context by which a black woman from the South, who's now working as a traveling nurse in Chicago, they want to hear that story. They want to hear about a young black man who traversed the corporate halls in New York. They want to hear their story about a young black teacher in the South. And you have a great story too about when what happened to you in your 8th grade class in your car. And so I personally, and I think one of one of the things that I've recently learned is that you got to get to a point where you can start to teach what you've been taught and what you've learned. And to your point, I have been fortunate enough to write on a great show like Insecure that I wrote on for 3 years, which is a phenomenal show about Black romance and Black friendship and being a Black person in the world. But now I know that we need to train more storytellers to tell these stories because the time is now.
Yes.
And I think it's always a perfect storm, because I think that when the world starts to shift, usually media and entertainment is kind of right alongside of that shift. Because if you're outside protesting, you're not going to want to turn on the TV and see Friends.
I know.
You're going to want to turn on the TV to see something that reflects the current state of what the world is in. And our arts and entertainment and our artists have always been the ones kind of on the forefront of that. So I'm completely encouraged, and I don't care if it's disingenuous or not. Just, I have a show right now in development at Fox. I have a movie that I'm writing. I get calls every other day now. And I'm trying, and there's not enough of me to go around, so I know I need to train more writers of color, and I'm telling them, write a story about your experience.
Yes.
People told me when I first got to Hollywood, don't write a show about Black people, don't write a show about queer people. I'm telling you to write the blackest, queerest, transest show you can. Write it, because that's the world we're in now. And I'm so fortunate that I've been able to have staying power in Hollywood to see this moment. This is a moment we've always wanted.
Yeah.
We've always wanted this moment where, usually when I go and try to sell a show, I'm in a room full of white people. And I have to start with the basic building blocks. and I famously tell the story. Insecure was in development for 3 years at HBO, because HBO didn't quite see. It's just a small little show about Black women, And I mean, Issa had a following from YouTube, but that show was in development for 3 years because it wasn't an immediate thought from HBO. This would be a hit. But now that show is a hit, every network is trying to do Insecure now. Yeah. Every single network. So, needless to say, I'm very excited.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So I want to end on a thought about right now kind of being an awakening, and we talk about being woke or not being woke.
That phrase has actually not been used as much. Woke.
It's not being used as much, and I think right now, you cannot live in a cavalier way, unaware anymore. You have been forced, you have been jerked awake and had to snap out of being on autopilot. And that's uncomfortable. If you haven't been able to kind of gradually enjoy your awakening as a Black person, to be jerked awake right now, what are you all's thoughts about that? Are you glad that even if it was a jerk, that our eyes are open?
For me, it was not a jerk. We've also spoke about this before as well. I'm very, very self-aware. I'm very big on self-care. I'm in therapy every 2 weeks. If times are hard, I'm in there every week. So for me, the journey to self-discovery and kind of where I am as it relates to the country and really as it relates to every subject you can possibly think of has been a gradual experience for me. So I think I do feel encouraged that other people are on their journey. And I just feel I'm excited that people are getting to experience just waking up and being educated and just really being the honesty right now. I feel like we need to be a little bit more raw and a little bit more honest. But this honesty right now, as far as where we stand, because so many people, so many Black people aren't honest about where they stand with themselves. So this jerk really got you together. So if you weren't really trying to discover who you were and why you were, now you do not have a choice. So I'm just excited about what's to come of this.
Sitting in the house on quarantine looking at the wall.
Exactly.
Having to deal with yourself.
Absolutely.
And you cannot run from yourself because you are quarantined in the house.
Absolutely.
And having to deal with that. Any other thoughts on that?
it has shifted society, and I do think that we needed something that was going to shift us all awake. You know, Spike Lee says at the end of school days, "Wake up." You know, and I think that's one of my favorite moments in cinema, just because every so often we all have to take a gut check and a pulse. And I think those of us who do the self-care and do therapy, you know, or in our faith, we regularly do our self-check and our gut check and our check to make sure, okay, how's my heart, how's my soul. I think now everyone's having to reckon with that. And so quite a time to be alive, I must say.
I read something. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I just hope we recognize the fact that by sitting around for all these years and not doing anything has got us where we are, right? And so, like, we've got to be more like proactive.
Not get comfortable.
And not get comfortable. Like, there's not going to be any free lunches. If we think there are, it's going to be the same, like, new legislative policies. Like, think of, like, we talked about redlining. That's illegal now. What was just outlawed, which is still in effect to a degree, is, like, gerrymandering. And that's, like, basically, like, redrawing, like, voting lines. And so if you even think about this, like, past, like, election, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but who cares about that, right? Because
that's the craziest thing.
Officials have gerrymandered, like, new voting laws for electoral college. So you've got to take advantage of that stuff too. Because, like, I look like, coming from, like, a corporate America perspective, I'm not gonna say my employer or anything, but I mean, like, right now, like, they're gonna donate $4 million to like top HBCUs. I'm pretty sure Morehouse, Dunn, Clark will benefit from it. They're talking about increasing the, like, pipeline of specifically, like, black recruits. These are all good and great, but it's like, at the end of the day, who's making these decisions? Like, right now, it's like still at the very, very top. And I remember even being like a first year and an intern, a second year. Now I'm a seventh year, right? It's still like there's not that many people up above that look like me. And so at the end of the day, like, you know, if we're not really truly mobilizing and, like, really, like, doing the work ourselves, I'm just afraid that this is gonna be like a, you know, it's like it's Christmas come early. We're gonna get a bunch of new stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Then by February you're shooting more. May I ask one question?
Like, Band-Aids, black Band-Aids.
I do want to ask, like, in the halls of corporate America, I mean, what is a strategy that one can do? I mean, is it that people like you, are you gunning for a board seat? Are you gunning for the C-suite? Are you gunning? I mean, is that and are we creating pipelines? Like, is that where the route in corporate America needs to go? Or what do you think?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's like, so yes, I am.
He's like, yes, right. Go to the top.
And I think that's always been the goal for most people, though. Right. I think what's happened historically is people just look at, like, had I come to, like, so I work at EY. Had I come to EY and I saw a bunch of Morehouse guys, right, as partners, it's like, oh, great, like, this is in the bag. Like, I know these guys, I can reach out to these guys, I can email them, I can call them, I can text them, I can ask around about them, who knows them. They look like me, they probably share a similar story as me. All too often, though, today, that's not what you see. Historically in this country, it's been Caucasian Americans.
The other way around.
And to the extent that there has been, like, a lot of, like, gains in, like, diversity and inclusion, you know, black people have benefited from it, but Asian people have benefited from that largely. Indian people have benefited from that. A lot of other people, colors of people. And so what's happening, I feel like, today is I have been delighted by, like, my firm's response. I've gotten phone calls from multiple partners asking, like, what can we do?
To help you get on the partner track, to help you get there faster, or
to help
help the.
Yeah, all of it, right?
Okay.
But the complicate, like, here's where the struggle is, right? And I was actually talking to, like, another buddy who went to Morehouse last night about this, and he's currently on Wall Street. So I'm in public accounting. He's on Wall Street right now with Barclays Capital, and we were talking. He was like, "Man, this guy just made in Wall Street, it's managing director, right?" So he's like, "This guy made MD, and he wasn't. So he was. I think he grew up he's a Ghanaian, and he didn't grow up in the United States. So he basically, like, came over, like, once he started working. And so I didn't even think he realized. Like, he was saying he didn't even realize he was black really until, like, age 23, 24, 25. He then gets over here, right? And he's like, all right. Nonetheless, I was able to work my way up to the top. So that is there. The playing field sometimes isn't the most level, but it is a playing field that you can win in, right? But the thing is, like, once you get to the very top in, like, corporate America, it's not really about who can bang out, like, an Excel spreadsheet or, like, analysis the fastest. It's all about client relationships. and it's all about building like your network. And if you think about who your clients are, it's Fortune 500 companies, it's mom and pop businesses, like huge regional players. Who own these businesses, right? If you think about it, like do these people look like us?
Yeah.
And so one like issue is, even if you like support all of us right now, maybe we all become partners, we all become MDs. Who are going to be our clients though? Who's going to call us because we grew up going to the same school, or because we went to the same Ivy League schools, right? And so then that becomes a performance issue, right? You're not generating new business.
Yeah.
So maybe you make it to the top, but how long do you survive at the top?
Yeah.
So that's what I say, like it really takes all of us. And just, I think a great study of people is look at the Hispanic people. Like they're a force to be reckoned with in this country because they support each other. They also have all South America, right? And this is technically their land, kind of. So they have numbers in their favor, right? But it's so many of them, and coming from LA, like you see how they support each other from even just at the neighborhood level.
Absolutely.
Then they have businesses. Some of those businesses grow. Then they get into corporate roles. And so as they climb to the top, there's a lot of people that look like them that they can kind of contact for a new business. Can we do the same?
Yeah.
So it does go back to supporting in your own daily life, supporting Black businesses. Yeah, I like that.
Yes. And not feeling some type of way when these Black businesses become extremely successful. That's a talk for another day. But I do want to thank you all for joining me tonight for our first melanated conversation. The discussion was real Black, and I appreciate it. And I want to thank our viewers, and we will see you all next time. Thank you.